As we heard from senior White House correspondent John Gizzi, after 4 years, special counsel John Durham's probe into the FBI's investigation of former President Donald Trump and his alleged ties to Russia has finally ended. Again, no ties there. Counsel's office concluding the FBI lacked probable cause to launch any action in the first place.
Durham's 300-page report taking direct aim at senior FBI and Department of Justice officials, saying in part, based on the review of Crossfire Hurricane and related intelligence activities, we conclude that the Justice Department and FBI failed to uphold their important mission of strict fidelity to the law in connection with certain events and activities described in this report. With us now, Devin Nunes, former California Republican congressman, CEO of the Trump Media and Technology Group. Jesse Binnall is an attorney for former President Donald Trump. Gentlemen, welcome. Thanks so much for coming on. Devin, first to you. I wanted to dive in just a bit more to this report, and then we'll get your response. Durham not holding back on his assessment of the FBI. He writes this: our investigation determined that the Crossfire Hurricane investigators did not and could not corroborate any of the substantive allegations contained in the Steele reporting. This is really going back in time. Again, if you think ahead of the Trump election, how does it feel today to finally have this report published? What do you make of the findings?
Well, first off, this is what we knew on the House Intelligence Committee back in early January 2017. So if you recall, this triggered a whole, what they called it the ICA, Intelligence Community Assessment, that was done right before Donald Trump took office. When they came to brief the Gang of Eight, of which I was a part of in January of 2017, we walked out of that meeting, and if you may recall, I stood out there in front of everyone and said, look, I haven't seen any evidence whatsoever of Russian collusion. And of course, I was attacked for that over and over and over again for many, many years, still continues to this day. So look, we ran a whole investigation, never found anything. And look, Durham has done a good job basically corroborating everything. It looks like at least from July timeframe of 2016 all the way through, he got a lot of good information that we didn't have. But look, there's still a whole bunch of people who need to be accounted for, including, and I'll just say this, what the hell was Bob Mueller doing? And Weissman, who continues to run his mouth. Remember, they had a special counsel that they approved. And I don't know if you'll recall this, but I said the day that Mueller walked in the door, he knew there was no evidence. So there are so many people that are culpable here. And, you know, maybe the Congress this can be part of the weaponization process. But this is the biggest scandal in American history that we're still living with today because it hasn't ended.
Yeah, Jesse Binnall, I'd love to get your thoughts on the matter as it pertains to the FBI, to the people who knew that there was not any fact base here to even conduct an investigation per the Durham report. They did it anyway. And when you talk about the people that knew, again, we talked about Obama, Clinton, Clapper, Comey, etc. Your thoughts on this and really how this shapes up the perception of the FBI at this point?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the point is that the FBI yesterday put out a statement that essentially said, oops, our bad, but you know what? We fixed these problems years ago. Hogwash. That's just wrong. First of all, the FBI would never allow that from an organization that it was investigating. If it was, investigating serious misconduct like this, for an organization just to say, oh, you know what, this was a problem several years ago, but we have new leadership and we've fixed it, and just take our word for it. And that's what the FBI wants us to do, is just take their word for it. And that's the second point here, which is they haven't fixed it. We continue at a time right now where we see some of the most politicized federal law enforcement we've ever seen in our country's history. The FBI has not fixed the problems. We see that back in the Crossfire Hurricane days leading into the special counsel investigation, you had FBI actors who were taking and running a play directly from the Clinton campaign, directly from political actors. They took their directions and they took information directly to FISA courts and ruined the lives of good people. And most importantly, they deprived the American people of the full-time attention of the President of the United States and his team for years. Which really was an attack on the results of the 2016 election. It was an attack on our democracy.
You know, we were talking at the top of the show about sort of how if you watch mainstream media, there's not been a lot of coverage of the Durham report yesterday. And Devin, to your point, believe you mentioned Andrew Weissman. We got some of his sound, his initial analysis of what was published. Here's that, and we'll get your thoughts.
You have an enormous number of cases which were proved, where there, as you pointed out, there are convictions, where there is a there. Russia interfered in the 2016 election. They're continuing to interfere. There are people who've gone to jail who are rightly found guilty. And what you have with John Durham is, like, it's a big fat nothing. And it reminds me of the sort of weaponization hearings that are going on, where there also is, they're just falling flat on their face because there is no there.
Devin, your reaction?
Yeah, so this is a very sick individual, and I think it gets to the point that Jesse was making, that what Weissman's talking about there is the whole Mueller witch hunt that should never have been started in the first place, because, as I said, they were supposed to look at Russian collusion. There was no evidence of Russian collusion. So Mueller walks in the door. This is the guy he bragged about being Mueller's pit bull. He goes in there and he basically sets up a bunch of people that he forced them to plead guilty. I mean, let's just talk about the most egregious one. General Michael Flynn, one of the best intelligence officials since probably World War II. The whole idea that they would frame this man as some kind of Russian agent is preposterous. And that's why this has repercussions that continue to linger on to today, because you have millions of people out there, millions of Americans and people around the globe whose minds are poisoned, whose minds are warped, who believe the nonsense from this guy because they can go back and say, well, we had all these people that pled guilty. Yeah, when you break them, you take their home, and it's a lot like, a lot of similarities to the January 6th prisoners who are being denied their due process, who are still sitting in jail today. And there's so many. We could take the rest of the show to talk about how the Department of Justice, it's not just the FBI, it's the Department of Justice and the FBI, have continued this political persecution of anyone who is center-right in this country across the board.
Still a lot to cover again, and we'll continue to unpack it. We are pleased to have Devin Nunes and Jesse Binnall. Thank you both, gentlemen. We do appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you.